All right. So, hello everyone and welcome to the Bug Bash. We are excited to have you all join us for the launch of this new series. Now, since this is the first episode in the series, I'm going to take some time here at the beginning to introduce you to the show, talk about the logistics of it all, and I guess probably tell you who the heck I am. In fact, seems like a great place to start. So my name is Jenna Beckett, and I am a senior DevRel engineer here at Cypress. And before my time at Cypress, I held various engineering roles from an IC to a lead. I did work across different tech stacks, but I would say that I spent most of my time in the world of .NET, followed closely by some front-end development experience in frameworks like React and Angular. I also spent a good portion of my career on engineering and engineering education. So I guess you could say that like nerding out on engineering concepts is basically a part of my DNA at this point. A couple things you should know about me. I tell absolutely horrendous dad jokes, and then I usually proceed to laugh at my own jokes. So I'm going to go ahead and just start off by apologizing for that in advance. But yeah, that's me. And that's the Bug Bash. So let's go in and talk a little bit about what we are envisioning for this series. The concept for this series actually originated from a leader within my team who routinely meets with test automation leaders across organizations that utilize Cypress. These conversations are always a highlight for her because they are more than just an opportunity to talk shop. They're a space where we can find others who are passionate about automated testing and want to share and collaborate on ideas. Of course, at that point, we then began to think about, well, how can we bring this kind of real-time collaboration to a larger part of our Cypress community? And it was at that point, well, I guess technically that plus a couple of ChatGPT prompts later to refine the name, that the Bug Bash was born. So the vision that we have for this series is to kind of think of this like the Cypress Lounge. It's a place to chill, a place to chat, and kind of let your mind wander through the forest of test automation. In all fairness, I did warn you all about those dad jokes ahead of time, so I feel good about that one. Let's go ahead and talk about some logistics for the series. So this is going to be a bi-weekly series that will be live streamed right here on Discord. I know our community spans many different time zones across the globe, so our plan is to vary our live stream times to give folks across as many time zones as possible an opportunity to join in the discussion as it's going on. However, for all of our sessions, we will plan on recording it and posting it to YouTube the same week so that if you can't join live, you can keep up with the conversation async. And as I mentioned earlier, just taking some time this session to kind of lay the groundwork for the series, but let me outline what the flow is going to look like for all of these future sessions. We're going to kick things off with what's new at Cypress. During that time, we'll cover new features, exciting roadmap announcements, and talk about events, and just awesome things going on within the Cypress community. Then we'll roll into the main topic of the bash, where we will walk through a specific topic that is of interest to the community, usually with a guest on board. And then we'll go ahead and cap things off with some live Q&A. But if you have a burning question and you can't join us live, you can drop a question into the Bug Bash discussion on our community discussion channel right here in the Discord server. And we will try and address any of those questions that come in between or before sessions. We'll try and address them as many as we can in the live episode. So, thinking of that, if there are things that you would specifically like us to address, talk about in future sessions, you can drop those in that community discussion as well. Whew. Okay, I think that is all of the logistics, the vision. It's the Bug Bash in a nutshell. Well, it's kind of me in a nutshell too, so I think we're done. let's get into the meat and potatoes of today's discussion. And today we are talking all about something that impacts all of us, and that is test maintenance. In my opinion, test maintenance is probably the unsung hero of reliable automation. Without it, your test suite can quickly devolve into a flaky, untrustworthy mess that hinders more than it helps you. Recently, I actually started a backyard garden, and I see tending to it as really no different than tending to an automation suite. I mean, I guess it's a little different because I don't generally talk to my automation suite to encourage it to grow, but I digress. But if the garden is neglected, then I'm going to be spending more time dealing with weeds than enjoying the fruits of my labor. Bada-bum-bum. All right, joining me on this discussion and journey through dad jokes is Dan from Cypress, and he is going to be here to talk test maintenance at Cypress and then maybe shield you all from some of these jokes. So, Dan, you want to take a minute to introduce yourself?
Yeah, Jenna, thank you for introduction. Glad to be here. I knew I was here to talk about test management. I did not know I was here to talk about dad jokes. So that one's going to be a bit of an adventure for us, but love the series. Love to start out on this topic. It's really important for us. So Dan Johansen, I've been with Cypress on the product team, really focused on incorporating your feedback and new features into our ecosystem. So glad to talk about testing.
Awesome. Thank you, Dan. Now, I know we are talking about test maintenance, and generally that implies actions taken after a test is authored. But I'd actually like to start talking about how you can impact test maintenance before the test is ever written. And I think that all really starts with the testing culture at your organization. And I think the most essential step for creating that culture is developing an overall testing strategy. You know, as we talk about these overall testing strategies, this is usually like a document where you say why your organization does test automation to begin with. It provides context for the quality lens that your organization uses. And most importantly, it generally defines the SMART goals that you are likely to, or that you are trying to achieve with test automation. And frankly, you know, if I'm being honest, it's usually what you are being measured against by leadership. So I would say like a good specific example would be how your organization stacks up against the testing pyramid. That is definitely pertinent information that you would want to define in your overall testing strategy, so it is very transparent to anyone in your organization who participates in maintenance or test authorship. So talking about overall testing strategy, Dan, I'd like to pass it over to you and have you tell us a little bit about like, what does that look like at Cypress?
Yeah, I think what it looks like at Cypress is what it looks like with a lot of our customers, a lot of our organizations that use Cypress. And there's the adage that if you do not define your finish line, you will never make it to the finish line. And that is so important and so appropriate here. We use Cypress, daily, for all of our testing, for all of our developments. But if we did not have that definition of what we're trying to do with it, it would not be the help that it is. And so first and foremost, you have to define those goals and what it means. And in Cypress, we've certainly done that. And it means a number of things for us. A lot of the reasons that we use Cypress are a lot of the reasons that many of y'all are also looking to use it. First and foremost, it's a foundation for everything you would do in CI and in DevOps. It's required for reliability. It is required for speed. And so having the ecosystem in place just establishes that framework that will allow you to go in and to be able to build incremental functionality and capabilities on it, but it's that foundation that's necessary. Gives you the immediate feedback from CI or even from local runs. It allows you to create workflows. What happens when you have a failure or flake? Where does it go? What's your engineering process for handling that? And that's built into Cypress. So we operate on a 2-week sprint cycle, like I'm sure many of you do. And we look at our metrics and we identify where there's things that can be improved, whether, obviously failure we address right away. If there's flake, it's also something that we recurringly build into our process. So I think, just the workflows and being able to automate things is really critical. But where we would be lost without it is the whole concept of reusable test. So every single change that we do at Cypress, every feature we develop in all of our apps, it always includes the test. And the PR is never finished. It's never committed and merged until the tests are there and they're passing and they've been reviewed. Because once that's established, we're able to then expand and change our area of focus, but still be able to test the functionality that we've delivered. A lot of organizations, without that in place, they get in trouble where resourcing becomes really difficult, right? You just can't keep up with being able to regression test and firefight things, but then still be focused on incremental development. So for all of our engineering shops, the ability to move quickly and to keep focused on new things for our users is so important, and that's a big premise of automation testing.
I think that one thing that I've seen at Cypress that I think is something that I view as a little revolutionary is the way, and this is way before a test is authored, but when you're looking to add team members, the process of who you're looking for. I know at Cypress, we tend to look for product folks with an engineering background, and we tend to look for engineers with a product focus. And I think those lenses of onboarding new team members, again, directly impacts the ability for test maintenance because it directly contributes to the building of test culture. One thing that I just have really, while I've been at Cypress, have seen and thought was a really novel approach. The other thing that I think is really awesome here is the PR reviews that the team does. I mean, I think that process that is in place and the stringency that's applied, again, applying maintenance practices or, being a little preventative in terms of maintenance or proactive, all of those really impress me in terms of, how Cypress approaches these things.
Yeah, I can definitely attest to that. Yeah, I remember when I was interviewing with Cypress and coming on, it was amazing, even in product, how technical they were looking for folks. And it's refreshing because being able to have that collaboration between product and engineering is vital. Being able to speak the same language and pivot the business requirements into technical, but then vice versa. Like our engineers, they're product people. They understand why we do things. They understand the big picture. They know how our users are making use of it. And so, yeah, that technical and product bend that expands across all of our teams has been really, really neat to see.
Awesome. Now, what about tools? Are there certain tools that you all leverage when you're thinking about these, like I mentioned, smart metrics in your overall testing strategy? Are there certain tools that the Cypress team uses to help define those?
Yeah, there absolutely are. In fact, I'm going to go ahead and share screen here.
Awesome.
Be a great just to take a look as we're talking through this, even show exactly how we make use of it. So you're seeing something, a tool I'm sure y'all know and y'all love, but Cypress here, this is something that is just critical for how we use it. So even before we go and we embark on new features, we're making sure that our testing strategy is going to conform to exactly what it is that our goals are for the organization. And so that really starts on the test setup side, right? So a lot of our users, think of reporting as simply an executive readout tool and an ability to be able to show reports and data to people who are decision makers. But that's just a small sliver of how it's used. And the governance is absolutely key. And so, where are you testing, Cypress, or what your automation tools, are you keeping them current? Because, they require TLC just like everything else in your code base. And so being able to understand, where are you keeping that current? Where are you taking advantage of new, functionalities? That's really critical. Certainly in terms of what types of tests that you're going to write at Cypress here, we do a mix. We do both end-to-end tests as well as components, and that test suite grows over time. And so it's something that we have to identify based on the type of feature that we're developing, what the most appropriate testing structure is going to be. And we just use that in order to, define how that test is going to go. But, outside of the, looking at some of the data here that we look at in Cypress Cloud, it's all about, just breaking down our past results and understanding how that may or may not impact our current item that we're looking to develop. And so, let's say we have flake that we need to address, and it's in an area that we're going to be spending some time. We're going to be rolling up our sleeves and making code changes.
Sure.
And that is the opportunity to go in and to make sure that even if it's not like a super flaky test over time, it's not rising up the metric board. It's something that we know we have to address regardless. We're opportunistic, and we'll take the opportunity to go in and to crush some flake while we're in a section. So that's part of our analysis as well.
That's amazing. I want to pull out another piece that I think you can show to us, because we talked about how I love the stringent review process that exists here at Cypress. And I know, as someone who, especially like early on in my engineering career, PR reviews were anxiety inducing. And I want to find a way to make that as least anxiety inducing as possible. Part of that is having a good team rapport and being able to give and take constructive criticism. But part of it is having the time to do a really good, thorough review of what's coming in to your repository, whether it be your main code repository or your test suite repository. So Dan, can you talk to us about some tools that, are available when I'm looking to do that kind of stringent PR review, get preventative in terms of test maintenance? What can I do to merge with confidence?
Yeah, there's quite a bit there, and I think you're right. There's the team dynamics, which is obviously super important. We're all working together on the same team. We're all working for the same goals. But then there's also tool sets that can help us as we look through that. So, with one of our teams here that I work with closely at Cypress, the PR review is a constant ongoing thing throughout the sprint. Again, I mentioned we're on a 2-week sprint cycle. And so we'll have our grooming sessions once a week. We'll have our backlog planning, sprint planning sessions, as well. We follow all the typical cadence meetings, but the PRs are constantly happening throughout. And if we don't have a way to efficiently handle that and to show that, it's just going to make things slower. And so one of the things that we use, I can actually show, go to the real world app maybe and show an example, but kitchen sink would be great. So one of our public projects here, but as we're going in and taking a look at something, you're able to go and understand how does that change relate to what we've done previously. And so branch review is a really good tool that could help to surface that information. Mm-hmm. So whether you're looking at things once they've already been merged into one of your primary trunks, or whether you're looking things on the develop branch, you have the capability to go into a branch review and to select and do a full diff of my current state of my branch compared to what it was previously. And so based on how wide that selection is, it's going to tell you, here are all the differences. Here's tests that have been added. Here's tests that were modified, deleted. You have new flake, you have failures. In terms of UI coverage, have you introduced new things in your code that are actually not tested? Because Cypress can help you to automatically detect you have a link or an element that is not being tested. That will surface right here as part of using our own tool set to be able to tell you this, I have test code, but maybe I've missed some things, and it could be more comprehensive. maybe accessibility is something that is, of utmost importance to the organization. How am I addressing that? Have I introduced things that are not accessible according to the guidelines? So, branch review is one of the tools that certainly makes it easier for both you as a developer as well as for your team to be able to take a look and understand not just the differences in the code base, but the differences in the testing between versions.
Nice. I want to move on to another aspect of test maintenance. And this is, again, a piece that happens before that test is authored. So you all might be seeing a trend here. Test maintenance, not just for after the test is created, something to start thinking about way before. But another thing that plays a huge role in test maintenance, that again, we're deciding upon and executing way before that test is created, is abstraction layers. I feel like I can say with confidence that anyone who has developed or maintained a test automation suite has at some point asked themselves, to abstract or not to abstract? And I also like to imagine that while they're doing that, they're doing this like whole Shakespeare-esque thing, like deep consideration pose like this. So to abstract or not to abstract. But I digress. While abstractions can dry up our code and promote reuse, they also can turn once very clear test scripts into like enigmatic riddles that only the original author can decipher. So, now, I want to say that I'm not standing here and saying that I am anti-abstraction, but it is definitely a balancing act, and, one in which too little and you're drowning in duplicative code, or if you have too much, you are in a maze of like, where do I go? How do I maintain this? How do I read this? New folks onto your team, like rest in peace, best wishes, in the Hunger Games, when you're trying to navigate and find all these layers of abstraction. And one thing that I see often is that these extreme abstraction patterns can necessitate really heavy test setup. And when this occurs, teams see their execution times trend upwards, which can often be like a puzzling thing to solve. And often I have seen that the culprit is hiding out in your befores or before eaches. So Dan, I want to know, can you talk to us about how the Cypress team measures test performance? And, do you all do that at a granular level? Are you looking at overall execution time? What tools do you leverage to help in on this? Talk to me all about it.
Yeah, I definitely cannot argue with that. And we certainly look at that data both from a granular level for individual runs, individual tests, and then we also look at it from the macro picture. And so there's a few ways to get to that information. But if I were to open up, any of our runs that we have done, you'll notice when you click on an individual test that's taking place, you have all of the information about the buildup and execution on that test. A lot of people don't realize that it's here, but it's super helpful information. So if you go down to performance, you can take a look at the test itself, look at the hooks and the test body in terms of how long it's actually taking to run. And you can look at that over time. So here at a test level, you can understand, has this been consistent? Has this been changing? But you can also look at the individual elements and understand what is the makeup of the actual test. And so you've got before each and then the test body. And so whatever is defined in the test, you can have a lot of information here that's contributing to maybe some setup and prep time that is taking place in order for the test to run. So this is, obviously at a test level. If I wanted to understand it at the run level, I've got that as well. Being able to look back, not just at the run duration, but what are the changes that have been made that maybe contribute to some of the differences. But I think another big thing that we would look at, and we do look at, is overarching test execution. So you're able to go and take a look at the test execution times at a project level and then drill into it. And maybe it's not just a project. Maybe you're going to filter this down and look at a specific run group, or maybe you're going to look at a certain set of tags. However you define your test and that gets recorded, you can drill down into those dimensions to really understand that. But the information is here and it's vital. So reviewing it at a test level, yes, very helpful at a run level, but then ultimately looking at it because you want to know how this is running in CI.
That's awesome. One thing that I mentioned earlier is, being rest in peace to new teammates if you have these extreme abstraction patterns. Well, one thing that you just showed us is you showed a test and all of the relevant pieces in one location. So if you are dealing with a test suite, you're new to a test suite that has massive amounts of abstraction, it seems like this might even be helpful to help you get to know the test suite in general. So multifaceted way of getting advantage there from the test detail sidebar. Okay, so I have another topic that I want us to dive into, and I've mentioned, duplication a little bit and, talking about how, that can affect your test maintenance. But one thing that I will say here is, enemy number one, test maintenance has to be duplicative test coverage. Duplicative tests, they're going to bloat your test suite. They're going to slow down execution time. They're going to increase the magnitude of your maintenance burden. It would help if I could say the word. I believe that it really should be an essential piece of routine test suite maintenance to go in and evaluate has new tests been added that duplicate coverage that was already established. Hopefully you have a process in place that as you are authoring tests, that evaluation again happens pre-authorship, again preventing any wasted time for writing duplicate tests. But let's be honest, when you have 10 people authoring tests, you are doing releases every single week, like that is a really hard pace to maintain and not get dupes somewhere. So in a lean and mean test suite, what we are shooting for is each test is adding completely unique value, and that's the goal. And I can sit here and say that's the goal all day long, but the truth is that it is easier said than done. Often this can involve hours or days of manual work going through and evaluating the test suite. And it can often require a high degree of domain knowledge about, what the product that you're testing itself, having that knowledge to understand where your tests are duplicating. So I want to talk, Dan, for a moment here about some things that the Cypress team does to, evaluate their test suites for duplicative coverage and how they are able to make that process as efficient as possible.
Yeah, this is a big one to unpack, Jenna. And I think, and we definitely have tool sets that we use internally to look at that. It's one of the reasons we've introduced some features into the Cypress ecosystem is we heard from you that this was a need to really understand not only what is not being tested, but what is being tested more than once. And I think, as we unpack this, you almost have to take that step back first and foremost, again, to look at where we started this conversation, which is what is your ultimate goals? Like if you don't have that success defined, you're never going to make it. And I would wager pretty much everyone on this call, part of their success criteria is about catching bugs before they go into production and they're seen by a user, right? And so a lot of orgs, I think, I hope so. Like a lot of orgs beat themselves up and they're like, but we have tests that are running duplicative or 10 or 100 times. And ultimately, yes, you can streamline some things, but you have to focus on your goals. And if you're catching your bugs before they get production, mission number one accomplished. But I think from there's a couple of other metrics that people would have. A lot of organizations will look at testing by code coverage, and they want to know every single line or branch of code has an appropriate test. Other people flip that around and say, well, if a customer is going to be able to see something, then they're going to be seeing it on a screen and they're able to interact with it. which is a UI coverage side of things. And that's where Cypress has really, been spending some time. And so if I were to, go and take a look, going back again to maybe the kitchen sink, one of my favorite little projects. For any of our runs that we have, we're able to take a look at accessibility, but really critical for this discussion point is UI coverage. And understand, in this example project that we have out there, that's again, a public facing project. Many of you are familiar with this. Exactly where is your application being tested and where is it not? So starting, first and foremost, what is the percentage of coverage that we have? But then you can also look and understand that, okay, across my test running, there's actually quite a few views or snapshots where the same functionality is in place and it's being tested multiple times. So if I were to look at, any of these views here, you can drive down into, things that you have for tests, and you're going to really expose that you've got things that are being tested across multiple places. We have stuff, and I was looking at some even even this week, where taking a look at a view and then going into the test that exists for that, and you find out that we had about 25 different ways that's being tested. But again, not going to beat ourselves up. I know it's an area for improvement if we want to really optimize the test suite, but focusing first and foremost, am I covering everything? Mm-hmm. That's most important to me. And then secondary to that would be, how can I work on that efficiency with duplicative?
Thanks, Dan. I think that this has been a really amazing discussion, and I appreciate you being here with us and providing some insights on how Cypress approaches test maintenance, all of these prime suspects to degrade your test maintenance, and obviously as test maintenance goes down or is negatively impacted, that confidence in your test suite and ability to catch those bugs that you're talking about, mission number one, also erodes. So we really appreciate you joining us. And I want to take some time and talk to the audience and see if there are some questions that you all have that we can answer for you. Now, for those of us joining live, we would love to hear your questions about test maintenance. And I know there is a ton of things in the Cypress ecosystem we could talk about, but we're really focused in on the topic at hand, test maintenance. So if you have some Cypress implementation questions, go drop those over in a thread in the help section of the server. Or if you're looking for roadmap updates, jump over into the community discussion. You can open a thread there and ask questions. For this space, let's talk about test maintenance and tell me what questions that you have. If you have some, I'd love to see them drop in chat, and Dan and I will do our best to answer them for you. Ooh, I just see a comment in the chat about a team having a tough conversation about abstractions. Yeah, again, guaranteed, we've all had to have that talk at some point, right? I have a question coming in, and it says, how important is creating a framework, BDD, in writing scripts? I think, if you don't mind, Dan, I'll jump in on this one. I think that this is a really great question, and one that really should be addressed in your overall testing strategy. I think that and we talked about this very early on, if you don't know the finish line, if you don't know the goals, you're never going to reach the end. The same way, you're never going to reach the end if you don't know the parameters that you're working in. So I think that, to this question, those framework creations, I believe that, that is something essential to decide upon, and know that you can be out there. There can be the latest and greatest things, and it could work really well for organization X. but it's not a one size fits all. Just because organization X had success with a framework or a framework in its truest form doesn't mean your organization is. You are going to have so many different factors that impact whether a given framework is going to be successful for you. Team makeup, team experience, all of, going back to levels of abstraction. How much or how little do you want in your test suite? All of those I think are essential, and I think it's essential to define that up front. Dan, do you have anything you want to jump in and add on that?
No, I really don't. I was taking a look at the next question. Maybe I can jump in on the next one, but I think you handled framework and BDD pretty well.
All right, go ahead and jump in.
Yeah, so the next question, thank you for submitting this, says, does Cypress have any tools in place to manage these issues that are not on the enterprise tier? And the answer is yes. There's a number of places that you can go. And so even in what we were sharing today, it was a mix. Like there are some things that are part of our enterprise tier. There are some things that are part of UI coverage. There were things that were part of everyday usage of cloud. And if you're not aware, Cypress Cloud is available as a free tier as well. So the data that goes up there, every project has analytics that is available for it. And so depending on what you're looking at, if you want to understand your slowest test, there's a page for that. If you want to understand your most flaky areas or your errors that are most common, there's pages for that. Looking at the run duration, there's overarching analytics, but when we dove into an individual run and then looked at the test, you'll remember that the sidebar opens up with all the granular level details. That information is available there, but it also comes from our Cypress app. And so, the same data, a lot of our users will be able to go and to pull the data, from runtime of using the app as well, either yourself or using a plugin that's on the market. So there's lots of ways to get from that and does not require enterprise tiers.
Awesome. Thank you, Dan. Any more questions? I'll take a pause. I have no elevator music prepared. I could tell you a joke, but I think you all have had enough of those for the day. I don't see any more coming in chat. We have a couple people typing. So while they're typing, I want to take a minute and I want to summarize some of the key offenders in terms of impacting test maintenance that we identified in this session. So let's start off right from the beginning with testing culture. And if your testing culture isn't there, you are not only going to struggle with growing your test suite, but also with maintaining it as well. A key factor in creating a good testing culture is having a defined overall test strategy. I absolutely love what Dan said. If you don't know what the goals are, you'll never reach the finish line. And I think that is so true here and has big impacts on test maintenance. And then once you have some guardrails in place, you've defined your framework in that overall testing strategy, then go ahead and put in bumpers, like, when you were a kid at the bowling alley. At least me, I was terrible at bowling. But put those bumpers in, right? Make sure that your team is staying on track. It's easy for them to stay in the road and head towards that finish line. And one way at Cypress, we do that is with really stringent PR reviews. Another key enemy to test maintenance is abstractions, but not all abstractions. So what I'm saying is you need to find the Goldilocks zone for your abstractions. And again, talking about no one size fits all, the Goldilocks zone for abstractions for your organization is going to be different. Again, factors like your team size, the roles that exist, the collective experience of the team, and the specific test authorship practices that you have in place and the responsibilities of who handled those. All these things are going to impact what level of abstraction is right for you. But no matter what you land on, make sure to keep a close eye on those execution times, especially at a granular level, so your test setup or teardown isn't causing you more time than the actual test itself. And then finally, more, it's not always better. And we talked about that in terms of test coverage. And Dan brought up a really good point. He said, don't go beating yourself up because you've kind of overshot the moon. You're covering one piece of your application multiple times. You're making sure there's no bugs. But you do know that, the next iteration around the moon, you've got time to make it there and around a little bit faster by going in and streamlining that testing practice. So finding ways to incorporate rooting out those duplicates, planning to optimize once those are identified. All of those things should be part of your routine test maintenance to keep your approach lean and mean. While we were chatting, Dan, another question came in the chat that said, what product were you most excited to release? Maybe a feature, an integration, whatever it may be. Tell us what holds your heart, Dan.
Oh, that is a tough one. I can't just give you one. I just can't do that.
It's not fair to the other features. They might get jealous.
There's so many things in this past year, really, just seeing the number of cloud releases that we put out there. There's one that we just released, and it's a silly little thing, but how many of you have been asking for the sidebar to be collapsible and expandable? Like, that's something that has been sitting out there with feedback for eons, and we just move that across the finish line. So seeing people not gain a new feature, but something that's just like quality of life that they've been asking for, I love seeing that and seeing the reaction from the users. But I think for me, maybe two. So Slack integrations were so fun to work on. And that's something that's available for all of our cloud plans. It's available in our free cloud tier. But we've really expanded the trigger points on Slack and Microsoft Teams messaging. You can now select not only more control over when that gets issued, it can include a run group, it can include a tag or a set of tags, but you can also you can control what the content is that goes into each message and how the content looks. And so maybe you want certain parts of a run result to go one channel and something else to go to another channel. You now have that ability, and it was never there before. So that one has been really helpful to a lot of our users. I think the other one I have to mention is getting API access, which we put into the enterprise reporting tier. There's been a reason that a lot of our users have asked, are there ways that I can get access to that even without being an enterprise customer? And Cypress will work with you on that. But it's not just about seeing the reports on screen, but it's about workflow automation and having access to either aggregated data or the very granular test results. Any or all of that is available through programmatic API. And so pulling that into ecosystems, for analysis, pulling that into your systems for workflow automation, it's been really a lot of great feedback on that. So that really keeps me excited.
Dan, we have in chat, can confirm Teams integration is much better than it was. So kudos to the team for that. All right, folks, we have reached the end of our time in this first episode. So again, I want to thank you all for joining in to this first episode of the Bug Bash. We look forward to seeing you in our next episode, which is going to be on May 13th. Remember though, folks, look for the announcements in the Discord server for time. We are going to vary these times that we go live so that we can allow as many people from as many different time zones as possible to join us in this live conversation. If you're not able to join live, we'll have the YouTube video up this week. Same with our next episode. Same week, we'll be posting it up there. And remember, if you enjoyed this, you want a certain topic to be discussed on a future episode, then drop us a note. Let us know in the Bug Bash thread in Community Discussions channel right here on the Discord server. Propose your topic, and you might see it in the next episode. Happy testing, everyone. We appreciate you joining in today.